Hey, this is Mr. Drogemeyer. Thanks for joining me for our Algebra 1 lesson videos. Today we are in Unit 5 looking at lessons 14 and 15, interpreting linear functions. So again, a lot of these last few lessons have been how can we use the information from linear equations, linear functions to interpret, to solve problems. In this one key term that we want to mention is parameters. And parameters, as the definition shows here, are the quantities that define or determine a function's performance. So when we're talking about a linear function, the parameters of that linear function are going to be the slope and the y-intercept. Those are the quantities that are going to define what's happening in that particular function. So let's look at our examples. So it says Jasper's taking a taxi to his hotel. We have a function c of d equals 3.75d plus 5. That's used to relate the cost in dollars c of the ride that he takes for d, that should say minutes. Looks like we got a typo there. What is the interpretation of the slope of this function? What's the interpretation of the y-intercept? All right, so our function, so c of d, the cost per distance, or for the distance, we have 3.75 times d plus 5. Well, if we think about our types of, or our structure of linear equations, this is in slope-intercept form. Our slope, or rate of change, is what's being multiplied by that independent variable. So 3.75 times d. So 3.75 is our slope. And then the number that's being added or subtracted here is our y-intercept. So slope, 3.75, y-intercept is 5. Well, what do those mean in terms of this particular function? Well, it said d is our distance. And so the 3.75, we're multiplying by the distance. We are multiplying a cost per distance for each, in this particular case, I think we're talking about miles. So that 375 slope, that's the cost per mile. Oh, and I said minutes here. That should be miles. That's why. That's what the typo is. So D is representing miles. So the slope is the cost per mile, 375 per mile. Well, the y-intercept, we want to think about what is that representing? Well, that's being added to the cost per mile. So what that's telling us is that's going to be the initial, or the starting cost. So when Jasper gets in the taxi, he's paying $5 right away before the taxi goes anywhere. And then on top of that, every mile that the taxi drives him is going to cost him another $5. So that's how we can take that slope and y-intercept and interpret it to get a better understanding of what that information is telling us. All right, second one here says we have a submarine traveling underwater when its pilot decides to dive deeper into the water. So we have the depth d in meters of the submarine t minutes after the dive and it's represented by our function d of t equals 55 plus 35t. So d of t equals 55 plus 35t. All right, so what is the depth of the submarine when it starts to dive? What is the meaning of the 35 in the equation of the function? All right, well, again, the 35 is being multiplied by the d, or excuse me, by the t. That tells us that that is our slope. The 55 is going to represent our y-intercept, thinking about slope-intercept form. All right, so that 55, that's telling us that's going to be there when the time is 0, that's what our depth is. So 55 is the depth in meters before they start that dive. Now the 35, that's telling us how many meters, and I'm looking at the time, meters per minute that that submarine is diving. So y-intercept, depth of 55 meters, slope 35 meters per minute. That's how that submarine is diving in that particular situation. All right, and that's all I got for you on this one. Appreciate you taking the time to watch. If you do have questions, please let me know. Thanks. Have a great day.